Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's jump straight in because today we're talking about something that affects, well, literally every single one of us. We're going to look at how a 19th century philosopher might actually hold the master key to solving our very modern, everyday existential dread. You know that feeling, right? You know what you need to change, you know that dream you've been putting off forever, but somehow you just end up scrolling on your phone and overthinking everything. Well, today we are going to unpack how to find the courage to finally become yourself.
So what if your anxiety isn't always your enemy? I really want you to let that sink in for a second. Because think about it. We spend so much time and honestly so much money trying to just eradicate anxiety, treating it like it's this awful disease we have to cure. But what if it's actually an alarm? What if your anxiety is just a blaring, flashing siren warning you that you are living way, way too far away from your true potential? That you're actively avoiding the person you know deep down you could become? Over 170 years ago, a Danish philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard got absolutely obsessed with this exact problem. His life was intensely dramatic. Think 19th century soap opera, complete with a very famous, very complicated broken engagement. And it was surprisingly short. He died at just 42. But in those short years, he basically acted like a psychological detective. He wasn't into boring, dusty academic theories. Instead, he produced these totally radical ideas about how a human being should actually, practically live.
Which brings us right to our first major modern trap. Section 1, the crowd, and the danger of conformity.
Okay, imagine you're standing in a restaurant. You have no idea what to order, so you look around. Literally everyone else is ordering pizza. So you think, well, I guess the pizza must be good, and you order it too. Totally harmless, right? But now imagine doing the exact same thing with your entire life. Everyone around you gets a certain career, so you get it. Everyone wants a bigger house, more followers, the whole shebang, so you want them too. It feels safe. It's so easy to just say, hey, everybody does it, or it's what society expects. You completely avoid taking responsibility. But Kierkegaard throws down this radical demand for the individual, directly challenging that safety net. He looks at you and asks, sure, but what do you genuinely choose?
He actually left us with this incredibly timeless, punchy piece of wisdom. He said, when everyone thinks together, nobody is necessarily thinking. Let that resonate. Conforming to the crowd completely strips away your authentic identity. It's like your life is a book. You're born with a first page written, but if you spend your whole life living in the crowd, you are literally handing the pen over to your parents, your culture, and your social media feeds to write the rest of the chapters for you. And if you do that, one day you're going to wake up and realize you don't even recognize the author of your own life.
Let's move to our next section to see how this builds into the process of becoming yourself, and the really interesting paradox of freedom and anxiety.
We have to talk about this concept he called the dizziness of freedom. See, authenticity isn't just doing whatever you feel like doing on a random Tuesday. It's about taking profound, heavy responsibility for the person you are becoming. Kierkegaard made this brilliant distinction between ordinary fear and anxiety. Fear has a specific object, like you're scared of a snake. But anxiety? Anxiety is that uneasy, restless feeling of just having way too many possibilities. Imagine you're standing right on the edge of a really tall building. You aren't just afraid of falling over, you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I could actually jump? It's that possibility itself that creates this strange dizziness. And today we are swimming in infinite choices, endless career pivots, completely new identities we can just invent online. And instead of feeling liberated by all this freedom, we just feel dizzy. We feel totally overwhelmed. Because having infinite possibilities also means having infinite ways to fail.
So how do we usually handle this overwhelming dizziness? Well, usually by just avoiding important decisions altogether, by living by other people's expectations, trying desperately to control the uncontrollable, and living in constant fear of disappointment. But the massive takeaway here is that we really shouldn't be trying to destroy our anxiety with endless scrolling or distractions. We need to treat it like a smoke alarm. Smashing a smoke alarm with a broom doesn't put out the fire in your kitchen, right? Instead, we have to investigate. We have to ask, what are these specific fears actually revealing about the life that you are currently avoiding?
And that leads us perfectly into section 3, the traps, and what happens when escaping yourself literally becomes a habit. One of the biggest traps is rooted in what Kierkegaard called subjective truth. We constantly overthink and we collect endless amounts of self-improvement data, mostly just to avoid actually living. Think about it. You can read 100 books on building confidence or watch 500 videos on meditation. But collecting facts, that is absolutely not the same thing as transformation. Kierkegaard argued that truth has to be personally appropriated and lived. Knowing the definition of courage is vastly different from actually being a courageous person. You don't transform just by hoarding information. You only transform when you embody the truth through your everyday actions.
And if we fail to act, we fall into what he called despair. Now, this isn't just feeling a little sad on a Sunday afternoon. It's a fundamentally broken relationship with yourself. It's wanting to be someone else, flat out refusing to grow, or just morphing into whatever everyone else demands you to be. So many of us spend our entire lives trying to escape ourselves through entertainment, money, status, or, ironically, even through obsessive self-improvement. We tell ourselves, I'll finally be happy once I'm just successful enough. And then the success arrives, and all we end up with is upgraded emptiness. It's exactly the same hollow feeling, just sitting on much better furniture. To break out of this despair, Kierkegaard outlined 3 stages of human existence. First up is the aesthetic stage. This is where you're just seeking constant stimulation. In today's world, that's binge-watching shows, swiping through short videos, gaming, just constant, endless novelty. The problem isn't that pleasure is bad, it's that you become completely dependent on distraction. Next is the ethical stage. This is when you finally step up, you accept responsibility, and you start asking the hard questions, like, what kind of person do I actually want to become? You start to really value character and commitment. And finally, the religious stage, which is where an individual confronts profound commitment and faith. And look, even if you aren't a religious person, the underlying structure here holds up perfectly. You absolutely must move from a distracted life of endless scrolling into a life of true, meaningful commitment.
But how exactly do you make that massive transition into commitment? Well, through a concept famously known as the leap. In his masterpiece, Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard uses the biblical story of Abraham to illustrate this point. The absolute most important commitments in your life, getting married, starting a new business, having a family, they simply cannot come with mathematical certainty. You can never guarantee the outcome. At some point, life demands that you act courageously before you have all the answers. A leap isn't just blind recklessness, it is a fully committed decision that you make despite the absolute impossibility of having total certainty. So let's take all of this lofty, brilliant 19th century philosophy and actually turn it into an actionable system for your daily life today. Let's break down the authenticity framework. We've got 5 practical steps to actually pull this off. Step 1, interrupt the crowd. Stop asking what society expects of you and start asking what you genuinely think. Step 2, name your anxiety. Don't just vaguely say, ugh, I'm so anxious. Trace it down to its root. Literally write down exactly what you're afraid of and why. Step 3, separate fact from possibility. You know how your brain loves turning I might fail into I will definitely fail. Yeah, you gotta stop imagining the failure and stick to the facts you actually know. Step 4, make one responsible choice. Just one single honest choice today. Your life is built by what you repeatedly choose to do, not by what you intend to do. And finally, step 5, take the necessary leap. When you run out of information, stop researching, put the phone down, and just act. I want to remind you why an explainer about a guy who passed away in 1855 matters so deeply right now. Think about it. Kierkegaard never even saw a smartphone, yet he completely understood that while technology gives us way more choices in communication, it doesn't automatically produce wisdom, freedom, or happiness. We're literally more connected than any generation in human history, yet we are constantly avoiding becoming the authors of our own lives. We have endless ways to curate and present ourselves to the world, but if we're being honest, we are completely uncertain about who we actually are when nobody is watching. Which leaves us with this final, ultimate challenge. Am I becoming the person I am capable of becoming? Not, am I richer than them? Not, do I have more followers than they do? If your core identity depends on comparing yourself to others,
You are playing a game that literally has no finish line. The challenge here is to stop living exclusively as a spectator of your own existence. So tonight, I want you to ask yourself this question. Stop waiting for the absolute perfect moment, stop handing the pen to someone else, and take courageous action on the life that has been given to you. Because the greatest tragedy isn't failing to be successful, it's becoming highly successful at being someone you never truly wanted to be.